Hey, folks, and welcome back to another Riftbound 101 episode. This is number 25, and today is Master Yi in Focus. It's going to be a very classic in Focus episode with a little bit of a twist that's, I think, going to become standard for the next couple of episodes, especially for the in Focus ones, as we move into the imminent Spiritforged release, which, hard to believe, is more or less 2 weeks out from the North American market. So the plan, as usual, concept, key pieces. I'm going to talk about core builds, budget option, and then I'm going to talk about future proofing. So considering the Chinese metagame, what's been popping up, and whether or not I think certain variants of the deck are better investments currently or not. So, or what you can do. The core concept for Master Yi Wuju Bladesman is quite simple. When a friendly unit defends alone, it gets +2 might. So Master Yi is one of the on its face most simple champions in the game. I think he may have been conceived in a lab where stacking units was something that was super advantageous, and so this is a pretty massive buff to get for holding with units. So obviously what you want to do with Master Yi is you want to get into a place and defend it for as long as possible with only one unit. So Yi will privilege either big units late game or medium-sized units earlier and strategies to protect them. Now, the way that the deck has been trending over the meta for Origins has generally been with option A, play big stuff. So you can notice this is the main deck curve A, which is for Master Yi Aurora, which really is play spells that ramp you early on and some amounts of interaction, and then just play all of your big units. So you really only have a couple of sevens, Tasty Fey Folks, your chosen champion, Dead Blooms, White Flames, and some Mountain Drakes, and then you're one of Orange Volibear. This is the Challenger TCG, best of list from Houston, which I think was the Daniel Zeidenberg list. And I'm going to link to videos talking about this list that are not mine. And you should just, honestly, if you want to play this version, you should probably just go watch the Challenger TCG in-depth stream, and then maybe the deck tech guide. Option B is a bit different, and this is the mid-range version. So this one was 6th at Houston, and really there hasn't been like much iteration on this since then. This list tends to not play Mountain Drakes or Orange Volibear. It tends to top out with a couple of Dead Blooms, couple of White Flames, and what you're doing is you're playing more early game units to sort of clog up the board, defend a little bit, and then you're closing out around 7 to 8. Which is like your turn 4-5 sort of slam down units kind of strategy. And then there's option C, which is the option that I've been tending towards for the last couple of weeks of this meta, which is sort of your Aggro Yi. Your super low to the ground, play only 2 3s and 4s, and your chosen champion is really your only card above 4 energy. I found this deck to be really surprising. And I was playing Yasuo up until a couple weeks back, and I find that this deck performs quite well into the current meta. I'm using the Sharkive list, and this will be part of the budget option in the video. So obviously, all 3 decks tend to privilege slightly different tempos. I would say Midrange and Aurora tend to be more compatible, whereas this version is like completely divergent and plays quite differently. So taking into context like the first 2 lists, the third one I think is just too different to talk about it quite in the same breath. Aurora and Midrange tend to just play very big units, and the bigger they are, the less of them you play. So the 12 count is really for Aurora, where you only want to hit your big drops with Aurora. You never want to see a small unit, which would be disastrous. Midrange tends to play more units. Then conversely, Midrange tends to play a little bit less ramp, whereas Aurora tends to play a lot of it. So you get a lot of value out of having less units and more ramp, or more units and less ramp. And then both decks play just like not a lot of interaction. And I'm not counting things like On Guard or Discipline, which I think are, semi-interactive spells. I'm really talking about cards that are going to force your opponent's units to die in any way. Orange and green generally are not, green especially is not good at that. And so what you get is charm, and you get sometimes challenge depending on the deck. So realistically, what this tells you about Yi is that you are not really wanting to interact with your opponent's units, which by and large are smaller than yours. You just want to get to your units first. And you want to play them as early as possible so that you can slam them down, and your opponent will have to commit a ton of resources to get them off the board. Obviously, if you're playing Aurora, you just ramp to Aurora, you drop it, it drops your big units, and that's it. If you're playing mid-range, you might need sometimes to hold up some extra energy, so sometimes mid-range will start to lag behind curve a little bit towards the end. It won't play like an 8-drop unit on 8 always. It might play like a 7, so that you can keep up an On Guard or a Defy. And I think the reason to really play Master Yi or to take a look at him now is that Master Yi, for the most part, has one of the most even or favorable matchup sheets in the entire game. His only truly disastrous matchup, and disastrous is putting it, very strongly, is Teemo with a 40% win rate. It's nothing like the 20-some, 30-some win rates that we see for other decks. And then he's slightly unfavored into Annie, which, as Annie has become more popular, is a bit of an issue. Otherwise, he's even into Kaisa, and I think this is largely because there are different archetypes of Yi. I think mid-range is a bit more at risk of getting blown out, whereas like Aurora tends to clobber Kaisa for the most part. Or at least it was the case when I was looking at like the kinds of matchups that were happening a lot, especially for like aggro Kaisa. And then Yi is just kind of miserable for a lot of other decks that you might see. So it's, you're reasonably like favored into MF and sort of like Yasuo, but you really clobber Set, which was for a small point a deck that was like popping up after Colin Kaiser's win a couple months back. So Yi's most attractive thing, I think, is really that you kind of get to be a Yi specialist and just put the weight of you being a better player than your opponents into the equation, and you don't really have to try to eke out certain wins from certain archetypes. Now, obviously, Kaisa and Annie have higher win rates and are generally, I think, perceived to be like top dogs now, but you can quite easily top an event with Yi if you're playing locals or a skirmish. Okay, key pieces. I think this is like really simple. You have a lot of ramp. You have some disruption, which is gonna like come in 2 flavors generally, and then you just have your big units. So your ramp, I think, is really gonna sometimes is gonna vary on what version you're in, but you're gonna have Catalyst and Find Your Center almost in all versions. Mobilize, I think, is really more for the Aurora version where you don't need to play anything early. And then you can count like Tasty Feyfolk in this. Really what you're trying to see is like breakpoints. So one of the most important things, for example, is going first allows you to play Catalyst of Aeons on 2. If you're going second, you absolutely need a specific battlefield, which will allow you to play Catalyst on turn 1, and then you'll hit 8 by turn 3. No. 4, 6. Yeah, you hit 8 on turn 2, which allows you to start playing your 8 drops on turn 2 already, which is pretty terrifying. And then you can open turn 3 with Aurora and have like an extra energy up. So those are like the kinds of breakpoints that you want to be mindful of. But for the most part, you're going to be ramping no matter what, because you need to get to your units or your Aurora before your opponent does. If you're playing mid-range, it's going to be a bit more controlled, and you're going to try to ramp at opportune times while you're playing units to hold battlefields. Your second sort of volley of cards is Disruption. This comes in like two flavors. You have things that I want to call like counters. So Defy and Windwall for specific spells. Defy for anything that's like 4 and an energy less. So things like your Void Seekers if you're mid-range, or your challenges if you're in the mirror. Windwall is really more for cards like Time Warp or Unchecked Power, like cards that will really just like demolish your strategy. If you're not on the mid-range version, this deck just doesn't care about most of what Kai'Sa is doing. And if you are, then using Windwall on something like Falling Star is still like too much of a commitment. You have things like Rune Prison as well to just like push back a unit that's like buffed. So if you're against like Set and you're staring down the barrel of like a 12 might Set that's used 2 buffs, you just push it back, and they've expended like a lot of resources to just lose out. And Sabotage is a card that you will often use in the Aurora version as part of the mirror. So you will try to get the opponent's Aurora out of their hand. And if you're against purple, your priority target is almost certainly Rebuke, which is impossible for you to defy. Combat spells, I think, are reasonably easy to understand. It's going to be things like Primal Strength in the mid-range and aggro versions, Discipline and On Guard. These are functionally small commitments to force your opponent to commit even more, and then you can just go over them. Often, your opponent will need to commit multiple units or units plus spells to even approach the defending might of any one of your units. So you get to hold up a lot of reactive cards and open energy and just kind of force them to have it. And then the sort of core of the Aurora and mid-range decks are your 4 bombs. So Tasty Fey Folk really kind of fills every role and is a bit anti-synergistic with Aurora in the sense that you would not want Aurora to hit Tasty most of the time. It's the lowest might unit and it has Accelerate, so you actually would rather draw it in most cases. And it helps you smooth out your game plan, right? So it channels runes, it draws cards, and it offers an Accelerate threat. Dead Bloom and White Flame, I think, are the core package of both decks. Dead Blooms are one of the most punishing units for opponents that are overcommitting. It also has Deflect. It's probably the best hit off of Aurora, save maybe Mind Splitter, and it will allow you to take back a field and deny a point on hold. White Flame is really to break parity, so it's a unit that if you're getting it off of Aurora, you generally don't feel as good about it, unless you're getting it off of second Aurora. So if you have 2 Auroras and you drop a Dead Bloom and a White Flame, then you can power up a Dead Bloom to 16, and you're probably winning whatever battlefield it's on. But this is not something that's always super easy to access. Often what's going to happen is you're going to have another unit, and then you're going to be able to White Flame, pump it by 8, and then take whatever battlefield was available. This is really for the mid-range version. And then Mountain Drake is really for Aurora. It's just big. 9 energy and a defense for 12 might is kind of amazing. Consider that one of the best aggressive units that you might see on a board is Darius. Darius plus Cleave does not make it through Mountain Drake, right? So you get, let's say you're playing 2 cards. So you play Darius, you play Cleave, it readies. Darius gets +2, he goes up to 7, +3 because of Cleave. It's at 10. Your opponent still needs to commit a 3rd card. And then if you have anything, they kind of just get run over. So Mountain Drake just big. 12 might is a good standpoint. And depending on the version of Aurora, you're also going to lump Orange Volibear into this category. So the big question for Aurora and non-Aurora is, what is your choice? Are you on it? I think if you are on it, you are really committing to the ramp plan. You can't really go any other way. Doing anything other than ramping into Aurora is pretty foolish, I think. And if not, you just diversify your early game creatures. You put in Stalwart Poros, you put in Kianas, and you're sort of moving into a mid-range version. However, and I'm going to talk about this when we get to the core list in a minute, I think the Aurora list that the Challenger TCG team developed, that Daniel Zeidenberg piloted to great success at Houston, and that has been pretty successful since in the hands of Alex Blandon and I think Daniel at another tournament, allows for what they call a transformative sideboard. So you side out Aurora and all of the other pieces that are relevant to Aurora, and you side in your small units. So you play game 1 as Aurora Yi, and then you play games 2 and maybe 3 as mid-range Yi. So as your opponent is siding in gear removal, you side out all of your gear and you kind of like devalue their sideboard and increase your speed. Your battlefields, you tend to run some of the most asymmetrical battlefields in the game, and they're kind of locked in, especially if you're in the mid-range or slow versions. You play Aspirants. You are the deck that loves Aspirants. The only other deck that loves it as much as you do is MF Aurora. You play Vile Maws because you're never moving back to base and you want to hold. So it's really good to have it on the field. If your opponent takes it, their units are stuck there, especially if they're playing Kaisa or Annie. You can just accelerate in a Tasty or a Dead Bloom that you drop with Aurora, and then or that you just play, and they lose their unit. You get the point. You get to hold. Vile Maws is really not something that you are scared about. And then Obelisk is for your going second games where you want to be able to play turn 1 Catalyst and just ramp super fast. It lets you skip basically a turn cycle and just play like ginormous bombs way faster. So these are like your 3 battlefields. Unlike most decks, this really tends to be like the only thing that you're doing with this. Okay, core builds. So I'm gonna just like present you the Challenger TCG deck, and I'm gonna tell you this is probably the most refined Aurora deck list that I've seen and that I've seen perform. I'm not going to talk too much about it, and instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to link the video that Anton put out a couple weeks back talking about this deck in way greater detail than I could ever do. So I would just recommend that you go watch that if you are interested in this version of the deck. This is the hyper expensive version of the deck because you're playing 3 Dead Bloom, 3 Aurora, 2 White Flame. This is like, Moneyball the deck. But yeah, this is what it looks like. And as discussed, you swap out your Aurora and probably your Mountain Drakes and maybe I think one of your Fey Folk into your Tasties and Stalwarts. You get in another Wind Wall if you need to play against Time Warps, or if you're in the sort of mid-range version and you're playing against Icathian Rain. Otherwise, not so much. And then Sabotage, the second Sabotage in, is really a side for, I feel like, mostly MF Aurora. But yeah, just watch that video. Anton will have like way better explanations for all of the choices and the roles that these cards fulfill in this version. The mid-range version, which is the other core, is the one that you see. You saw Houston and 6 Blades by Clyde. I had to like retrofit this deck list. If anybody has the post to Clyde's deck list directly, I would love to swap it out. But battlefields are the same. And here what you see is the presence of cards like Pit Rookie, less in on Clockwork Keepers than the other version, which allows you to draw. And you cut out all of the big top end that I was talking about. You get 1 Kiana in for that 4 range, and you're playing Primal Strength. You tend to fight for field a lot more. I feel like this deck kind of is the I play 1 unit a turn deck when you're not in a good position, and that can feel pretty awful. Aside, 1 Unyielding for Icathian Rain and maybe Unchecked Power. You've got Mobilize to ramp a little bit better if you need to, Rune Prison to push back equally big units, or for the mirror. MF is an interesting side choice. I would imagine it's to allow Dead Bloom and White Flame to gank, and you can trick out some plays with that, but I'm not like the biggest believer. And the double Aurora like kills me, because it's like if you're gonna run it in full. And Volley is really for when you're running the Aurora list. So if you're playing the Aurora list, you're probably cutting out your 7 2-drops and your 1 4-drop, and you're just jamming in the entire side. And I find this deck is also trying to transform into the other version of the deck, but I find the Aurora version transforms way better than the mid-range version. Yeah, that would be my sense for this. And then the budget list that I want to talk about for today, I'm going to be honest, I was like really not super enthused to talk about Aurora Yi or Midrange Yi, which I think are decks that are reasonably well known at this point and are heading into a weird meta for them. But I started like doing a lot of research, and at the same event that Ice Cream had a sort of undefeated Yasuo list, third place was taken by Sharkive. And this has been one of my favorite decks to play in the last couple of weeks. This is like a super aggressive Master Yi deck. So you're playing none of the top end package. In fact, what you do is you completely cut those out. You're playing multiple Kianas, and you're playing things like First Mate, Mask of Foresight, and you're like really holding points with Primal Strength and Last Stands. And that's really kind of it. You get to side in triple unyielding if you're against Kaisa. It's like functionally a counterspell against Falling Star, Void Seeker, all those cards. You get to run Rune Prisons for the bigger decks. You get to run Wind Wall for Time Warp and Acathian Rain and Unchecked Power. And if you are finding that you don't need the masks, you really only need to go over their units, you can play the third Last Stand. And if you're stuck in like a weird mid-rangey matchup, you can trade out probably like one Clockwork Keeper and one mask for the two Carnivorous Snapvines. The battlefields are entirely different, aside from Vilema's, which is really like one of Yi's most lucrative battlefields. You love Dreaming Tree, and I've made a lot of videos where I tell people don't play Dreaming Tree. It's like way too beneficial to Kaisa. I think in this deck, you are likely to get more value out of it than almost any other deck. And it solves one of the deck's inherent problems, which is running out of gas early. You're not going to be able to hold on and draw a ton of cards. And Arenas is your going first battlefield. So I would play Vilema's on neutral, Arenas on going first, and Dreaming Tree on going second. So you can power through your opponent. And Meditation is another interesting addition to this deck that Sharkive made that I quite like. Often you're going to have like a 2-cost unit that's sitting on a battlefield, like your Pit Rookie or your Stalwart, and you're not going to use them for much. So you might as well exhaust them and get 2 cards out of it. And then if they're on Dreaming Tree, you can actually draw 3, which is a lot of card draw for not a lot. I think that this deck is pretty cool and has been pretty successful for me. I have one more skirmish to run this weekend, and we'll see how it does. But I feel like this is the deck I would recommend the most, despite the fact that I think the Challenger TCG deck is the best. And I'll tell you why. So one reason is the budget. The budget list is like $34, and the mid-range and Aurora versions are like 360 something to 405. It is like 1/10 of the price. And these are the prices that are on Piltover from the TCG Arena stuff. But I would also caution you that there is a cost of owning Proving Grounds, which is not inconsequential. If you own it, it effectively is 0 for you. But if you don't own it, buying into Yi is a pretty expensive endeavor that's probably going to add like another $25 to $40 just to get Yi honed and the Master Yi Legend. So I personally feel like the budget is really where I would orient people, primarily on price, but also because of the meta that we're entering. So I mentioned at the start of this episode, I want to talk about future proofing. And really what I want to talk about is that Master Yi is maybe one of the most depreciated decks out of Origins going into Spiritforged. This is the current Rift decks, deck count based on the Chinese meta. And obviously things can change and we might play different decks here. But it is notable that Master Yi is currently the 8th most played champion in terms of deck representation, and Master Yi has not really been doing a lot better in terms of top 8s. So if you look, his top 8s are really only 95 of them compared to Ezreal, Azir, and Fiora, which I think are getting a lot more visibility. Victor is one of the most played and actually converts less than what his play rate would intend. And then if you look at the top, it really is like Irelia and Draven. And I think part of the reason why Master Yi is not seeing a lot of play is Master Yi kind of gets run over by Draven in all of its incarnations. So if you want an example of this, you can watch the Turn 'em Sideways broadcast for the regional 2 weeks ago. and there's like a top 16 or top 32 Master Yi match that just feels like watching somebody get absolutely clobbered, and it'll tell you a lot about what's happening. In terms of what the deck looks like going forward, like this is maybe the best placing City Challenge deck that I've seen. And you might notice it looks a lot more like the aggro version than it does like the Aurora version. So a lot of units have changed. Your Kianas are out, and the other units are all common, so it doesn't matter. You're off of Primal Strength, which has been replaced by Punch First, and then you're moving towards Trinity Force. And the big additions for this deck, I think, make a ton of sense. Lonely Poro is another source of card draw. Sea Monkey is something that can wear a buff and sort of be a flexible going first or going second drop. Akshan is just crazy. I think like he is one of the better orange cards to have entered the meta, and he kind of is one of the reasons why Aurora is unplayable. But he can steal a bunch of equipment, and there's enough of it going around to be worth. And then the primary card that I think is orienting orange strategies right now is Ruin Runner. So Ruin Runner has the clause that it can't be targeted by spells or abilities your enemies are using. So 6 energy and 5 cost. But I think what's been happening is this card does struggle against people just stacking long swords or spinning blades or using Aurelia with buffs. You would think that it's amazing because we were in a Kaisa meta, but we aren't really right now. And so what you're doing is you're trying to make your units a bit bigger, and you're trying to protect like a Ruin Runner using a Trinity Force to double score. So you like push it in, you get a point, and then it holds, and the next turn you get 2 because it's holding, so you get the regular plus the point from Trinity Force. You get access to some really cool cards, though. Not So Fast, I think, is, for the purposes of this deck, an improvement on Defy and Windwall, so you get to consolidate both aspects of that, and then you get Thwonk, which is an upgrade to Rune Prison. You're almost always using it defensively, so you're happy to get less energy expenditure for more. Battlefields, Vile Maws remains core. You get Forge, which allows you to attach equipment without having to pay the power, which helps the economy a little bit. And then you get Power Nexus, which allows you to recycle runes to score some more. So you're trying to like sneak out a win earlier than some of the late game decks can do it. And some takeaways from this is the Aurora and Aurora-centric units are just gone. Like they're nowhere in any of the orange or green decks right now. There's no White Flames. They were in some Azir decks. They're getting cut. Dead Blooms are kind of out, with one exception that I'll mention in a second. So we're moving towards the aggro version. And this is kind of why I would recommend playing the aggro version if you really want to be on Yi for the next 2 weeks or so, is that you're just spending less money to get a good playstyle, or a good sense for the playstyle out of the box. And you're not likely to play the Aurora or mid-range variants going forward. I think the deck is still largely unsolved, but it is definitely true that like purple clobbers most of your deck. And the problem with Draven is you would say, okay, well, the orange version, the red version is somewhat favored, but they still run things like Gust or Rebukes. They can kind of just side them out. And this deck also gets mopped up by the Miracle version, which just drops way more power on the board than this deck can handle. If somebody's playing like double Rasa, double Battering Ram in a turn, you can have all the Triforces in the world, but you are going to have trouble stacking 20 might on any single point, and not having to spend like 4 or 5 cards to do it, and they're just going to outdraw you and outtempo you. And if at any point they break your hold, it's just like way harder to get in. Yi really only struggles when having to take points, and so I think he's just like not in the right pace. Slash purple is in a weird situation, which you can go watch my last video about that if you really are interested. So yeah, that's sort of where I'm at with Yi. I am having a ton of fun playing it right now, and I'm kind of in a like down zone, prepping for the next meta, but I would struggle to tell you to sit on Aurora. I did mention one exception, which I'm going to talk about now. If you are, wanting to be on Aurora or you have copies, I do think that the decks for you are probably going to be MF or Sivir, which are on Deadbloom and Aurora. And I think those are like Deadbloom, Aurora, Mind Splitter sort of shells. So I do think that that deck type will still exist, but I think it needs more protection from gear destruction or gear theft, and so it's going to need things like hard bargain in purple and sabotage, and also controlling tools, which MF has better, or like pseudo accelerate ganking stuff that like Sivir has better. So yeah, that's it for today. And let's think through like what we want to do with this deck archetype going forward. I'm probably like taking this and pivoting into Fiora, but we'll see. And next Monday, I was struggling with this before the episode was like when I was trying to get ready for recording. I'm pretty sure I'm going to do a discussion about how to play in limited, which is really what I do most of. I was a Magic drafter for a very long time. So we're all heading into pre-rift events, and I'm sure if, this is a channel for people who are doing it for the first time, you might be interested in understanding some fundamentals about limited play. So that's going to be next Monday's episode. Otherwise, good luck on this last weekend of skirmishes if you're going to one, and I will see you next week.